Welcome everyone to this sponsored interview with Cocos BCX. Today I'm talking with Richard to explore how the blockchain industry is coming together with the gaming industry to deliver more value for developers and more value for the game players themselves. So let's get into it. I am super excited to have with me today Richard from Cocos. Richard, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Cocos is a really exciting project. So when you guys started talking about what, I looked into it and wow, blockchain and gaming, this is something we talk about a lot, but I want to hear it from you. What is the elevator pitch, the short version of what Cocos is doing?
Sure. We are a full stack solution provider for blockchain gaming and gaming economics. So we provide a blockchain and software engine and also an IDE to help developers produce games on different blockchains.
Nice. You're good at the elevator pitch. That's good. Yeah, you guys have fast elevators in China. I love it. Now,
Yes.
why the gaming industry? How does the gaming industry benefit from blockchain technology? What can it offer to the gaming industry?
Well, if I may break down that question into two. Number one, our team has been in gaming for a long time, starting from this Cocos 2DX and 3D engine with the 1.2 million developers all around the world. So we kind of see this opportunity of blockchain mechanism, which is mostly economics, that can potentially change the fundamentals of games. For example, there is an economy in almost every game. Some of it are really good on asset model, which is you buy something, you keep it permanently, and you transfer it instead of paying for a service. So we want to capture that opportunity and try to replicate what we did before for the developers and help them to migrate to blockchain time. That's what we're trying to do.
Very, very cool. And I want to go back a little bit to that first point you made. You said you got about the 1.2 million people, but Cocos is massive. I mean, you guys have 30% of is it the global mobile gaming market?
Yes, we're among one of the largest game engines.
That's massive. That's massive. So it's 30% of the global market and 45% of the Chinese market. And so you have this giant base of developers there who are already working with your developing engine. So they're already building games using Cocos. And now we're going to bring out this blockchain implementation. How do you convince all these developers to move over to the blockchain and to say, hey guys, I know you've all been doing this for a while, but we got the blockchain here and it's going to be better?
Well, I think our idea is not to convince or persuade because it doesn't work for them. The thing is, based on our past experience, there are two things that's very critical. One, that are like working tools, well, which is the things we're trying to build. You have to provide the whole thing for the developers to minimize their cost of adoption. And number two is we really need to explain the how it works, why blockchain gaming makes sense to them, how their business model can potentially change and benefit. So these are the two directions we're going. One is technology, another two is more like commercial and educational.
Yeah, very, very cool. And by the way, can you tell us a few of the famous games that have been developed on the Cocos game engine? Because I was quite impressed by some of the names.
Oh yeah. Well, so thanks to our partners and all the users. Some of the series of Angry Birds, Badlands, and also Clash of Clans, and a lot of the Zynga games because Zynga used a lot of Cocos engine at their early days. So games like that. And we also have some numbers. For example, right now on the Apple top grossing list, 30% of the games right now on Korean list are made by Cocos. Roughly 40% in China, 60% in India, and also 40% in Japan. So still, it's a widely used engine today.
Yeah, I mean that's massive without a doubt. Now, in terms of, I guess, blockchain and the gaming industry overall, no one's really done it well yet. We saw CryptoKitties come out, and I know it's not so much of like a game in terms of what we normally think of, and there's been a few people working on it. We have Zeepin working on bringing some games in and things, but it's kind of unproven yet in the industry. And so in terms of getting users on board with blockchain developed games, how do you think that either, a company like Cocos or the developers you're working with, how can you communicate to the people playing the games, come and play a blockchain game because it's going to have benefits for you?
That's a very good question because most of our peers we have been talking a lot. Some of them try to motivate the users from a traditional, let's say, blockchain project point of view by offering free benefits or like coins. But we're probably also game players. We know there might be better ways. So the game users, they don't really care about blockchain or what, and all the underlying technology. So what we're trying to do is, if we can help the developers to actually make this mechanism fun to the users. For example, essentially users like us, we pay for the time, money, and behavioral data in exchange of some digital experience. Some of the digital experience, for example, like fighting games, they're very interactive. It doesn't really go long. But some of the digital experience, for example, like card games, like Magic the Gathering, when you own certain experience in the form of the cards, that's permanent. That's something can possibly integrate with the blockchain mechanism really well. So those number games, economic games, collectible games, with all those permanent value, that's something we think the users would really benefit by owning them, being entitled, transferable. So those are the games that we would encourage developers to start with. And then we, together with the developers, we promote them to the users and players.
I'm imagining a really seamless transition from like one game to another. So as an example, and you can tell me if this example is right in my mind the way I'm thinking about it. Let's say that I'm playing an RPG and I get a very rare sword, and then maybe a month later, I don't want to play that game anymore. So I want to sell my sword. I can sell it for, let's say, Cocos tokens, and then I can actually go to a new game that I'm playing. Let's say it's going to be a space RPG, and I want to buy a spaceship. And so I can make that value of that sword very easily transfer over without having to sell it for dollars and to go through all this process. Is that kind of how it would work between game-to-game asset transfer?
Technically, yes. But the problem right now is not about this technology, how we transfer either a non-fungible token to another or through some fungible tokens. The problem is how the users or the players can actually build this value connection between two things. For example, a sword in Lord of the Rings, how is it valued in the to a spaceship in the Star Wars? So our team, based on the gaming experience, we are trying to build this economic connection with some like technological tools instead of just make it happen, because it doesn't happen like that. In the future, if we expected these kind of things to be massive, the most critical thing is to build this value coordinates in our minds, which is how is it valued. So this is something that the whole industry is trying to tackle.
Very, very cool. Now, you mentioned earlier that you're looking at how to enable developers to build blockchain games on different blockchains. So how does Cocos, having their own blockchain, how do you actually let developers do that? How are you going to be interoperating between these blockchains?
Okay, so the basic idea about Cocos is not about build our own closed system, because eventually it is up to the developers and players' choice what kind of blockchain they want to be on, what kind of technology you want to use. So we are designed as an open system at the first day. So our blockchain, we hope in a period of time, it would be a preferred choice, but not the only choice. So technically, we provide interoperability from our engine, which is a software framework serving as a middleware, to having data communication or like event communication, execution communication with different kind of mainstream blockchains. And also, not just blockchain, we will also incorporate other protocols and components, for example, scaling, security, exchange. So later on, we hope we can connect different like gaming protocols, blockchain systems, and the community with our core components. So in terms of blockchain, again, we're right now working with ONT, NEO, Loom Networks, Nebulous. Some of them are generic blockchains. some of them are game oriented. So we consider them as partners that we value very much.
Very cool. And so some of those partners you mentioned, they're actually looking at how to get the people building games on top of theirs to have this easy conversation, I guess, between blockchains.
Yes, yes. I think most of the peers right now in blockchain, they really pay much attention to games, because if we look at the history, games, because of their very short value chain, so it's easily monetized. A lot of developers going into the industry, starting with games, and then later switch to more complicated or sophisticated softwares. So that's really the first stage, and that's also what we believe in.
Very, very cool. Now, the Cocos chain itself theoretically can go up to around 100,000 transactions per second, which is pretty robust in my mind. Would you be expecting that most people who will be working with you will actually be building on Cocos, not just using some of the tools to build on another chain?
Yes. So first of all, actually, I want to explain, which is our blockchain is built on Graffiti framework, which is the base of BTS and also EOS. So we didn't reinvent that. But based on that, we did a deep redesign to make it more adaptive to high-performance applications, especially gaming. Mm-hmm. A lot of the technology we use, for example, like compartmentalization of tasks, or we have node segmentations, those are all for making good games at the same time maintaining the consensus mechanism. So this is our first stage plan. We're actually very flexible alternatives, for example, or some parallel technologies, for example, like DAG. So the thing is that, as you said, the idea of Cocos at the first stage is to provide developers a working environment instead of a perfect environment, but definitely industrial grade. So that's why we're using Graffiti. And right now, in our alpha testnet, we can reach 3,500 TPS. But again, not our invention yet.
Yeah, very, very interesting. By the way, what's your favorite game?
Well, I haven't had time to play games for a long, long time. So
I know how you feel.
I think, yeah, we probably share the same problem. We don't really have much time. But I think, well, the time I spent the most was Diablo 2. So I'm pretty old, and I think I spent most of my money on Magic: The Gathering online.
Nice, nice. I never got into Magic the Gathering. I never got into Magic the Gathering online. I stopped playing it. I had the actual cards, but in terms of like online games, yeah, Diablo 2 was actually quite a big one, and there was another one we used to play all the time. I can't remember the name of it right now, but yeah, it's been a few years. But definitely when I see a project like Cocos, whether I play games right now or not, I look at it and go, that's exciting, because I understand the application for games without a doubt. Now, I wanted to talk about your delegated proof of stake. Obviously, like you said, you've taken inspiration from and some code from both BitShares and EOS, building on Graphene. So why delegated proof of stake? I know they both use it, but why do you see this as being a superior system to undelegated versions of proof of stake or a proof of work?
Mm-hmm. So mostly two reasons. One is at this stage, we want to find the best solution to balance performance and also the blockchain mechanism itself. So DPoS for now, it's actually we would say it's a good choice at this stage. Number two, if we really look at the nature of the game economics, actually DPoS makes a lot of sense. Number one, for most of the game genres, they're not like money-heavy type of stuff, unless it's gambling, which actually is not the main purpose of Cocos engine. Number two, in any game, there are actually superpowers, which, for example, in Lord of the Rings, if it's an open world game, in the future we will see a lot of the big accounts. So our idea is to follow the game economy top down, which is those superpowers, as they are in the real world, they may have better authorities over many things. that actually goes all the way down to the, for example, like infrastructure, like block production system. So DPoS as a dedicated system, it makes some sense in the game economy. But in the future, if we can find some, let's say, more optimized or like some of the other mechanisms that fits better, we don't mind supporting or switching to that mechanism.
I think you have to stay open and basically go with whatever is going to provide the best experience for the developers and the easiest, I suppose, interaction with the games that are being built. Now, the number 100,000, obviously that's a theoretical, we haven't proven that yet, and even 3,500 is quite robust considering most blockchains currently. To put that in perspective though, how many transactions a second would you need to run, let's say, a large world kind of game, like, let's say, whether it be like Fortnite or, Diablo 2 back in the day or whatever it might be? How many transactions a second does one of those games require?
Well, I think, again, I think number one, this is a very good question, and there are a lot of concerns behind it. I think the first one would be, what should we run on it? So in our white paper, we proposed the 4 stages of blockchain gaming, or virtually all the blockchain applications. So first stage, we settle in-game economy. For example, like the points I earn or the things I earn, I can settle them and exchange them into crypto and make it valuable. Number 2 would be those cryptocurrencies, either non-fungible or fungible. They flow into the game, being exchanged and used directly. Number 3 would be the core algorithm on chain. This is something we actually really value and we're working on, which is, for example, in the economy, most of the projects right now, our peers, they're trying to solve the problem, how we define these non-fungible tokens, how they're transferred. But in economics, there is another really important aspect, which is how can we guarantee the scarcity of supply? Because that is something makes an asset an asset. So we think by enabling algorithm on chain, we're basically enabling the scarcity of supply. So the 4th stage, which is the whole application on chain, we don't really see the necessity of it. So if we enable the scarcity of supply, we enable the transfer of titles and everything is open, irreversible. There, we got a basic framework of this blockchain decentralized economy. So back to that question, number one, we don't think we have to see this whole thing to be decentralized for now. Number 2 is that if we want to achieve that core algorithm on chain, I don't even think 100,000 would be enough. There will be a lot of sidechain scaling channel solutions for that, because if it's a main chain, the purpose of it is to record and to support the most critical events on this chain overall, instead of any specific application. So in the future, we do believe the idea of, for example, Cosmos, which is one application, one chain, those kind of idea actually make sense as long as the application economy supports such kind of spending and all this circulating.
Very, very interesting, without a doubt. Now, one thing we've kind of skirted around a little bit, but I want to know the exact purpose of is the token. What's the token do in the ecosystem?
So we believe the idea of token is that to have a native token, the underlying merit is that you have a independent standalone economy. They have their own paradigms, how people behave. So gaming is such kind of economy, if they call that. It's $130 billion a year market. So people exchange, the developers buy stuff, and also there are a lot of third-party services. So to sponsor that economy, we probably need an independent media. The price of the media or the usage of the media actually reflects the people in this specific domain. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're proposing an alternative like Cocos token instead of just use ETH or Bitcoin directly.
Makes sense to me, and obviously using a crypto in internet money essentially versus trying to have people send money from their bank accounts or something, it just wouldn't really be applicable to a high-speed gaming environment. Now, you guys decided not to have a public sale. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, I think two things. Number one is, again, as we discussed, the users and developers, they don't really get motivated, if we think the majority of them, by taking this price difference or making an investment gain. The users really need good games, fun, without knowing of any underlying technology. Developers need the tool to actually help them make money, like millions, like those traditional, like conventional games do. So different to some of the blockchain projects, like infrastructure level projects, which actually need the traction from the public sale. We actually more need the resources and the funding for developing those working tools.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea why we raise money from institutional investors only. But we want to give the developers free tools and the users low cost entry to the fun games.
I think it makes sense from some different legal perspectives too, because if you keep it to
Yes.
accredited institutional investors, the lawyers like that stuff. We can just leave that there. It's definitely something they love. Now, because we didn't have the public sale, the tokens are not in as many people's hands as they might be, right? They've gone to some of the bigger investors. I know the Cocos Foundation's keeping a lot of them. So how do you get people into using the Cocos tokens? Are they going to, if they want to start buying in-game rewards, they're going to have to go out and buy some Bitcoin and then go to, an exchange and buy the Cocos tokens there and then send it over to their game account? Or is it going to be an easier onboarding process to actually get the tokens to buy your in-game rewards and all these different things?
Mm-hmm. So that's also a very good question, because most of the people think, if I should pay the money, how do I exchange? How do I get Cocos token to start with? But let's don't forget that most of the games, you don't really have to pay any money. Instead, if you get any like for example, drop-offs from the game, or any, let's say, incentive tokens, it's actually free, let's say free token. It's equivalent to airdrop, but at the same time, it's more fun. It integrates with the context. So for users, we're not worried about that they have to pay or they have to find a way to exchange Cocos token to play the games. For developers, actually, we also offer them the free minimum tools. At the same time, we give them incentive tokens based on their volume of production and also the value of their production, which we propose in the white paper. So that's the idea, which is like following this industry nature to make users play as they will and developers try to do something easily.
Very, very cool, Richard. It's really exciting. I love seeing this nexus of the gaming world and the blockchain world coming together. And I know there's a few other people who are kind of playing around with it. And some of those people are your partners, which I find very encouraging. People like Loom, for example, are going to be working with you, not against you. So I think that's all very, very encouraging. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sitting down and taking some time to tell us a bit about what you guys are doing over at Cocos.
Thank you so much, Lark. I really enjoyed talking to you.